It's This Morning on TVC News. Thank you for staying with us. We are talking about development in Rivers State. It was a heated debate on the floor of the Rivers State House of Assembly yesterday, Thursday, 8th of January, as lawmakers moved impeachment proceedings against the Governor Siminalayi Fubara and his deputy, Professor Ngozi Odu. And this is the third attempt to impeach the governor. My guest is Gloria Okolugbo. She is Consultant Communications and International Engagement. Good to have you on This Morning.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Talking about happenings in Rivers State, this is the third attempt to impeach Governor Fubara over allegations of gross misconduct. And the latest allegations include failure to present the budget and the unlawful expenditure of public funds. What are your thoughts about the latest twists to the Rivers State political debacle?
Your audio is a bit shaky, but I can just begin on the note that we have to redetermine the crisis in Rivers State. The crisis in Rivers State is no longer a political disagreement. It has become an institutional failure driven by the elite capture of democratic institutions. So when we put it in the right perspective, we realize that political interventions have failed, and Rivers State is too critical a state to be left for this kind of prolonged political capture. We can't forget the incidents of the periods of 2011 to 2015. All of that crisis has, bloomed till now. So it's important for drastic interventions to rescue the democratic institutions in Rivers State. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you. You've spoken about the need for interventions to rescue Rivers State. And I'm curious who you think should make this intervention. For instance, should the president, considering that in the past, at least he has intervened at least twice in the matter in Rivers State, and even the Speaker of the Rivers State House of Assembly yesterday actually accused the Governor Fubara of reneging on agreements and then running to the president. So do you think that Mr. President should get involved again in trying to restore order in Rivers State?
We're talking about institutions, and we're talking about institutional failure that has been prolonged for so long. Like you said, the president has personally intervened severally politically, and it has failed. Political actors are practically incentivized to keep the instability going because they benefit from it. So it's now important to lean on the third arm of government, which is the judiciary. The State Assembly and the governor can only be reined in by the laws at this state. And you can have that happen in two stages. An immediate, just like the way we had to have the interim government, that has come and gone, and yet we don't have stability. And so there has to be another 6 months framing of an attempt to hold in check the institutions, the executive arm and the legislative arm in Rivers State. That has to be done as a matter of emergency. There can be an institutional emergency Supreme Court action that redefines the issues around appropriation, the issues around the constitutional provisions of, I think it's 120, section 120 to 122, that has to do with the budget. So we need a definite pronouncement for Rivers State, because Rivers State is too critical economically to leave the resources hanging. Everybody is actually after the resources in Rivers State. So if we have a Supreme Court intervention that can be initiated, then everybody can, a lot of things can be defined in the sense that you can't talk about peace talks on their own. There are audits. There's what we call democratic audits that can be activated. So we think we need audit in Rivers State, and that is supervised by the National Assembly. In fact, you can go up to the fact that the Supreme Council, the highest arm of, when the president is overwhelmed and he needs the input of the former heads of states, he can convene that meeting. And within those reins, it can take decisions that the Supreme Court will have to interpret and intervene and audit Rivers State. I think that is about the practical solution that we can give in a democracy right now for Rivers State.
Well,
Political discussions and shaking hands over the counter and gentleman agreements because of respect for the president has practically failed in Rivers State.
They've practically failed, you mentioned, but then also just this past year, there was emergency rule in the state, and it was with the intention to restore order. And when that emergency rule ended, the thoughts and expectation was that things should be back to normal for the good of the people of the state. So what is the guarantee now that perhaps another emergency rule, if it had to resort to that, would actually proffer a solution?
Democracy cannot survive when we just hinge it on maybe the president's action, or we just finished an emergency rule. There's hardly anything another emergency rule will do that has not been done. You know, when this emergency rule ended, when we were not sure if it was going to end, it was so unpredictable. And then you found that the governor now became a member of the party. He has crossed to the APC. And the members of the House of Assembly had prematurely crossed to the APC, even when PDP did not have crisis. And so the governor had declared their seats vacant. However, by a political agreement and solution, all of that was supposed to have been resolved to give way for budget presentation and all of that. But that gentlemanly agreement is not working. And so that's why I talked about the intervention, although it might be unconventional. It is called an audit. And I think that they should look into that option. You know, that way, they can invoke the constitutional right of the governor to present his budget. And again, governors are allowed within the ambit of the law to run the budget, you know, from January to August. So at least he has some window of 6 months to run the budget, that is, you know, the overlap budget. So within that period, the Supreme Court can adjudicate, you know, and bring these bodies together to determine what happens in Rivers State, determine the legitimacy of the members of the assembly, determine the rights of the governor to present a budget, determine their meetings, the meeting periods, the locations of their meetings, and determine the issues of the impeachment, because impeachment has become a dangling thing on the neck of the governor for which he has to keep negotiating. Also, the issue of you cannot present budgets. Then on the part of the State Assembly, the fact that they resigned and their seats are supposed to be vacant is also another issue hanging. And so in all of these circumstances, there's a lot that has to be legally interpreted to manage the process and make sure that these institutions have some form of legitimacy to operate. Both sides, it would have been better for them to politically adhere and politically handle this, especially being in the same party. Don't forget, the APC has already condemned the impeachment move. But even coming out of the talks, we heard the governor talking about the fact that the House of Assembly is operating by his magnanimity, that they don't exist. We can't have systems that are running on that. That's why you have people's egos involved. We cannot have democratic institutions that are governed by people's egos. And so it has to be defined legally. What the president can do is summon an audit and see that the process, what he can do is midwife the process for the third arm of government, for the National Assembly and the Supreme Court to come in at this stage. Right. And that, I think, will create some form of stability, because any decisions that are taken will be binding to both sides, and it will not be optional.
I'm glad you spoke about the fact that the governor is now a member of the APC, because I was going there, and his party is, of course, at this time speaking in his defense, condemning the actions of lawmakers who are trying to impeach him. And before the impeachment proceedings, you know, we have noticed a war of words between some chieftains of the APC, you know, the vice president, South, the national secretary, and even the FCT minister, who actually is a member of the PDP. And I'm just curious, how much of a shield do you suppose the APC can offer Governor Fubara against the impeachment process, which is even being moved by members of the State Assembly who we understand are members of his new party, the APC?
What they can do can only be political, because he is now a member of the APC. But political has failed, so we have to be realistic about it. There's the issue of the fact that as the APC, as an APC member now, I understand that the constitution of APC mandates that the governors are the leaders of the party in their states, if they're in APC. And so he's the APC leader of the state. However, we find that the structures in the state assembly are completely loyal to the state governor. Again, there were councillors and chairmen that were elected during the tenure of the emergency rule. And so where does that place them? Are they legal? Are the chairmen and the councillors that were elected during an emergency rule in a democracy, are they actually legal? You know, so we must define all of these things, because everything that is happening in Rivers State is very hazy.
All right, Mr. Kolugbo.
You know, it's not healthy for democratic structures.
I need to place you on hold for a moment. We have a caller on the line, Mazi Okorafo. Good morning and welcome to the program, Mazi.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Mazi.
Hello.
Yes, good morning, Mazi. We can hear you. Let's have your contribution, please.
Hello.
Mazi, we can hear you. If you can hear us, please fire on. It appears Mazi is unable to hear us. If you can, we'd appreciate that you call again, Mazi, so we can get your input on the matter that we are discussing. So, Mr. Kolugbo, back to you. You've spoken about the fact that it appears political solution has failed in Rivers State. What we now need is institutional framework to resolve the crisis. And as you've inferred, through your responses, Mr. Kolugbo, this development raises questions about the key issues of Godfatherism, loyalty, and service. Where should we draw the line?
Rivers State is not suffering from a lack of leaders, but from excess power. Excess power tussle, individuals, who arbitrarily abuse the reins of power that they have over the people, the issue of control of structure, the issue of institutionalizing the fact that Godfatherism has come to stay. It's kind of ironic, because when the present FCT minister was a governor, he's been quoted several times to say when he leaves power, he will actually, allow his predecessor to perform, But he says that there was an agreement between him and his successor. We are not aware of how deep these agreements are that have caused all of this. But the truth is that it's very important for him for the stakes, to be, for them to reassess their stakes. It's a matter of power, too much arbitrary power available to persons. The powers of the governor, if he were to, actually activate his power, the powers of the governor of a sitting governor in a state, if he were to activate his power, it's very, very difficult, despite the structure that is on ground, that is loyal to the FCT minister. His full powers as governor, which we saw the FCT minister exercise when he was as a governor in full bloom. It's a lot, they call the governors emperors. However, waiting till election is where the structure can come to play, because you can now say you can get him out of the system by, using the structure at the primaries.
All right, Mr. Kolugbo, let's take another break. At the primaries, we'll get back to you, Mr. Kolugbo. Let's take Prince, who is calling from Ogba. Good morning, Prince. Welcome to the program.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Let's have your contribution, please.
Okay, your guest is taking us back regarding the legitimacy. Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go on.
Okay, yeah, your guest is taking us back regarding the legitimacy of the assembly, because this was one of the issues that Supreme Court dealt with This was one of the issues the Supreme Court dealt with in the past. The last ruling that got to the Supreme Court that dealt with the legitimacy of the assembly. But for Fubara to come back to say the assembly has no legitimate right, it is wrong. You understand? Mr. President has tried in the past to find a political solution on 2 occasions regarding this issue. And in those occasions, the governor did not keep to his own side of the bargain. You understand? Just recently, the governor woke up to send 100,000 naira to the assembly members. That is an insult.
Insult?
And he woke up, he called them toothless bulldogs. They can bark, they cannot bite. These people represent, they are voted by their constituencies, they represent people. They represent people. For the past how many years? The governor has been running the state without a budget passed, excluding the emergency rule period. He has run the state without constituted state assembly. Last time he ran with 3 people, I'll be 2 members. And now he's continuing with the same thing. It is not legal.
All right, Prince.
It is complete.
Thank you very much, Prince, for talking to us and sharing your thoughts at this time. Ms. Okolugbo, Prince raised a number of issues, which are part of what we are discussing. He spoke about the 100,000 naira that the governor offered to civil servants in the state this past Yuletide, and which the lawmakers rejected over claims that it was not part of the budget, and so they could not accept it. What is your take about that particular development? Because it would seem it's a 13th month salary sort of thing where, employers or at least leaders try to show support and love to those who work with them.
Well, let me first of all talk about the fact that he said that I took us back. I didn't take us back. In his statement, he said the governor accused them of illegitimacy. If there's a judgment and you still have the governor saying they are working at his behest, they don't exist, that's not something that shouldn't be addressed. And so that's what I mean by saying there has to be an audit. Part of why I also said there has to be an audit is because of these issues of, spending unappropriated money, and the fact that they are questioning things about the budget and about the spendings in 2025 budget. It's very important to streamline what is spent in the interim. But they cannot, instability, we cannot afford to allow a gap and instability in Rivers State.
Mr. Okolugbo, we have another caller. I understand your passion to speak on this matter, but let's just quickly bring in Mazi Okorafor. He's back on the line. Mazi, welcome to the program.
Good morning, my sister Mazi Okorafor from Aruchu. Good morning, my other sister. You see, Mazi Okorafor is speaking from Aruchu. When we talk about Rivers State, I schooled in Rivers State before I moved up. Look, there are 2 things playing in Rivers State. This issue of money, politics, power. Now, this is the Fubara is an Ijaw man. Wike group is from the other, and 80% of National House Assembly. They are Ikwele people. Now, if the Ikwele people don't want Ijaw man to head the state, they should open up and say, not the question of bring all these stories and no stories. Ikwele people have been there really. After all, it was Ikwele people that took over. When Amechi came up, now what do we do? You see, a country like, so a state like Rivers State, where they have national, do they want all those oil moguls and all those investors to live in Rivers State? And Rivers State is one of the states that after Lagos talk about Rivers State. What annoys me most is that all these House Assembly members in Rivers State, these are young, small boys. I call them small boys, not the young boys. Because at their prime age now, as a youth, you're supposed to see that, decide what you want for your state. Not going to collect money from it because you want power. Now, Impeachment, after impeachment, the job people, that state will not enter that the federal government here, whether they like it or not, it will not enter the blame that because I don't know, people are still complaining. What is the problem in this country? When Trump comes to Nigeria, people start complaining. Now look at what is going on.
Mazi Okorafor, thank you for talking to us. Well, you did raise a matter, and it's something that we like to not really talk about, and which is the issue of ethnicity, because this should be about the good of the land, the growth of the people. If there are gentlemen's agreement as to which part of the state rules per time, but it shouldn't be something that will now be placed over the issue of perhaps meritocracy or other developments. So, Ms. Okolugbo, this matter is multifaceted. These impeachment proceedings are on, and really we are waiting to see how it pans out in Rivers State. But you have shared what you believe is the way forward. You believe there should be institutional solution. But considering that this has gotten to this point already, just how smooth do you think your solution could be worked upon? Because already it would seem there is unrest in the land, and there's some level of instability.
You cannot remove the ethnicity when it comes to politics. The politics is an integral part. And the fact that the issues he raised, first you notice that the first caller talked about the overbearing nature of the governor. And then the second caller is talking about the issue of ethnicity and his perception of harassment or disturbance of the other ethnic group from being a governor. So it's part of the politics and it's part of the issues at play that is causing the instability. However, as an analyst, I'm not pro the assembly, neither am I pro the governor. We're talking about solutions and calculated solutions. And the solutions are all about building the institution. And so to build the institution, it's very important to, first of all, address the issue of impeachment. The impeachment issue has been hanging around on the governor. And if you look at the Constitution, the impeachment, at the end of the day, is at the behest of the State Assembly. It actually says, it's almost like at the end of the day, after you talk about the charges, it's almost at their discretion. And so the issue of the impeachment, the threshold for impeachment should also be addressed, and so it cannot be addressed outside of the law and outside of auditing. So we'll just call on Mr. President to midwife these processes. They're processes that can actually be put in place in such a way that with the support of the National Assembly, there can be some threshold of about 6 months for the governor to operate certain principal things like salaries, things that are already appropriated that can't be held back, some major things that the governor has to operate either way, while the issues on the table about the impeachment, the threshold for impeachment, the statements made by the governor is handled, in a way that there can be institutional corrections, that they are binding things, that the Constitution, and of course what the Supreme Court pronouncements are made clear, and everybody has to adhere to them. Because there's no one person that is greater than the law. That's very important. So thank you for
the law.